All right, this is our habit reversal project, take two. So the participants were Andrew Melvin, myself, Cody Pearson, and Kimberly Wright. This is original study overview. The study that we attempted to recreate was named Using Habit Reversal to Decrease Failed Pauses in Public Speaking. This was by Carolyn Mancuso and Raymond Miltenberger in 2016. The purpose was to evaluate the effectiveness of habit reversal training, such as awareness training and competing response training, and reducing failed pauses. Some examples of those are the use of uh, like, or when you click with your tongue during public speaking. The participants were six female college undergrad and grad students who self-rated public speaking as average or below average and demonstrated the target behavior of using two filled pauses per minute during baseline speeches. The intervention was the use of awareness training and competing response training to reduce filled pauses in speeches lasting from 3 to 5 minutes. Awareness training was used when they identified and tracked filled pauses in videos and live speeches. Competing response training was used when they practiced replacement behaviors, such as implementing a 3-second pause after a filler word, such as or and after they use this, or placing their tongue against the bottom of their teeth for 3 seconds if tongue clicking occurred, and also rephrasing their sentence if like was incorrectly used. The IOA and fidelity portion, IOA was conducted on 33% of all sessions, and their IOA score was 87%. Treatment fidelity was conducted on 33% of all sessions and had a score of 100% during all phases and with all participants. The results were all participants showed a decrease in filled pauses, and these results were maintained during a 2 to 5 week follow-up. And this is our study. The participants and setting. Participants for the study were found using a convenience sample. The participants were also the researchers who conducted the study. This posed an increased risk to validity, which will be discussed later in this presentation. The setting was within a scheduled or secluded area of the participants' homes between the times of 5 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. Each participant recorded themselves for 3 to 5 minutes within the secluded area after doing 10 minutes of research on the pre-selected topic.
I'll talk a little bit about myself here. My name is Andrew. I'm a male, age 25. I'm an ABA major from Indiana. All three of us took the same entry survey that all the participants did in the Mancuso and Mittenberger study. It went from a 1 to 5 Likert scale, with 3 being the average. I feel like I'm about average in my comfort with public speaking. For my overall ability, I feel like I'm about average. I'm not the most confident in this ability, and I also don't feel like I use too many fillers, but my anxiety in public speaking is a bit above average.
All right, and this is me. My name is Cody. I'm a male that's 27. My major is in ABA, and I am from Virginia. I rated my comfortability with public speaking at 2 because I'm not very comfortable with it. My overall ability is also a 2. How confident do I feel in public speaking? I put that as a 2 also because public speaking is one of the things that I do not enjoy. I put my fillers at about average at 3, and my anxiety with public speaking would be about a 4.
Okay, it's my turn. My name is Kimberly Wright. I'm a female, 37, ABA major as well. I'm from Marion, Indiana. For the social validity survey, I rated most of my stuff about a 2. So comfortability with public speaking, I would say is about a 2. Rate for overall ability, I would say roughly a 2. Confident, I'm not very confident in public speaking, so I gave this one a 2 as well. How often do you use filler words? I would say a 4. As we'll talk about further in the study, I did not notice my tongue clicking, but I do feel that that would make that potentially a little higher. How anxious am I with public speaking? Very anxious. It is one of my least favorite things to do.
And this is our target behavior. And our target behavior was the use of filled pauses. So our operational definition of that was any filled pauses are defined as using a word such as like, or that doesn't contribute to the speech directly and uses a filler to the speech, or when the participant clicks their tongue to make a popping sound. These can occur throughout a speech, including the beginning and the end. An example of this could be when a person is speaking and they use the word before beginning the next sentence. A non-example could be when a participant uses the word like when they're comparing two subjects. So the social impact of filled pauses. Public speaking is a highly valued skill in many situations, including school, work, and job interviews. Increased diffluencies, like filler sounds, affect perceptions when the rate is 12 minutes per higher, but a rate of 5 per minute may be acceptable, makes the speaker seem more natural and less robotic. The National Association of Colleges and Employers noted in their job outlook in 2023 in the report that approximately 50% of employers seek to hire applicants with strong verbal communication skills. This just emphasizes the importance of trying to track filled pauses. The company Indeed, which is a job matching platform, also emphasized the importance of public speaking for job applicants in addition to discomfort with public speaking that influence job performance. A survey reported in the source said 78.8% of employers rated oral communication skills among the top 5 most important skills for college graduates. U.S. Department of Labor shows communication skills, including oral expression, are strongly correlated with wages. The speaker's fluency affects how they are perceived by the listener and the audience. And this is our design. So we used a non-concurrent multi-baseline design used across 3 participants to evaluate the effect that habit reversal had on reducing the amount of filled pauses in public speaking. The baseline phase length was different across the 3 participants, and the treatment phase started after the stability of data across multiple sessions for each participant. Our data collection looked like video recording of baseline and post-intervention. We had sessions that were 3 to 5 minutes in length, and we rounded to the nearest 15 seconds or 0.25 minutes. This is just to help us all know how to calculate the habits per minute. Videos were supposed to be scored using frequency in 15-second intervals, but this was amended to basic frequency. The rate per minute is calculated for each session. IOA was collected using a standard IOA formula for percentages, and data was recorded on 3 spreadsheets in the shares document. As for our baseline, stability of data was ensured before moving on to the treatment phase. Baseline included recording the habits per minute without including the 5-second pause. After data was stable for multiple sessions, then the treatment phase was implemented. So I started my treatment phase at session 6, Andrew started his treatment phase at session 7, and Kim started her treatment phase at session 4. This is for habit reversal interventions. Awareness training and competing response training were used side by side to decrease the frequency of filled pauses. Awareness training was designed to help the participants recognize their own filled pauses and the antecedents that led up to their usage. Once participants can recognize filled pauses, then they move to the second intervention, which was competing response training. CRT was used to break habits by offering alternatives and was responsible for most of the habit reduction. This is breakdown of awareness training. Awareness training is a 2-pronged intervention made up of response description and response detection. Response description was completed with the researcher where the participant was informed of the operational definition of filled pauses. It was complete when the researcher deemed the participant understood the concept. Response detection consisted of watching baseline speeches and the participant raising the left hand when they thought a pause was coming and the right hand in an occurrence of a filled pause. 85% filled pause recognition was required to pass the response detection portion. To recreate this, we mulled over our baseline multiple times to ensure we recorded accurately. During one study, Spieler and Miltenberger found that less than 1 hour of awareness training alone was sufficient for reducing speech disfluencies. This is a breakdown of competing response training. During competing response training, the participants were presented with 2 new topics to choose from. And because we were the researcher and the participant, we had free choice over the topics. During this, speech participants practice engaging in the competing responses for each of the target habits as follows. So we practice replacing and with a 3-second silent pause, and we replace like by beginning the sentence without saying like. This is my graph. So I had 20 sessions. I ended my baseline after session 5 because of the stability of data. And after my intervention phase, you can see that my data has decreased. So I was decreasing my usage of fill pauses. My baseline range was 0.67. My baseline average was 1.73. My intervention range was 1.69, and my intervention average was 0.76.
And this is my graph right here. As you can see, I initially had a little bit more trouble with my filled pauses in baseline when compared to Cody, but once I got to the interventions, you can see that my data was very stable and decreased almost immediately. So my baseline range was 2.18, all due to that one up there at 5, but it stabilized, so I needed a little extra time due to that big spike. And then my intervention was consistent throughout.
All right, this is my graph. So I started my intervention after 4 because my baseline was stable. And after my intervention, I feel like it dropped pretty well. And then it continued to drop throughout. My baseline range would be a 0.96. My baseline average is 5.98. My intervention range was 3.71, and my intervention average was 1.18. I had 2 sessions with 0 as a minimum.
And now I will be getting into the less favorable part of our study where we are going to be talking about our treatment fidelity and our IOA and the issues that we had with both of those. The first one I'm going to be talking about is our treatment fidelity score based off the initial checklist we made when we all got together when we were submitting our protocol document. According to that initial checklist, we scored a whopping 33%. There were a lot of issues behind this, mostly rooted in communication. So it was 33% because only one of the three of us, me, followed the protocol we initially made. And by we, I also mean me, which is the key issue. Incidentally, the one who completed it correctly also creating the system, which exposed an obvious flaw in communication and a need for a system that we were all familiar with and agreed on. We also exposed this issue rather late, as no one was assigned to be checking on other people's completion of this, and we kind of just left it up to our initial understanding, which was not wise. Once we realized the issue was present, we met up and we decided to create a new checklist based on retroactively, based on the things that we were already doing that were part of our common understanding, which was a much smaller list than our initial fidelity checklist. If we wanted to go by our new fidelity checklist or our amendment that we made most of the way through, it would be 100% because it was based off the things we were already doing. But of course, doing this retroactively, we can't exactly say that that is our treatment fidelity. So in the original one, you can see it's quite lengthy there on the right, our original one. It was time consuming. Some of the factors were frivolous and wouldn't change the outcome, such as being so strict about how to time it. We also used a second sheet in the recording, which was the frequency within interval that had to be omitted due to some communication errors. So essentially, we had to simplify this and fix these miscommunication errors in order to get this rectified. We did the best we could when creating our amended fidelity checklist. It was smaller, easier to maintain, intuitive, simple, and represents the preferences of the whole group. We all had input on this, and we should have done it this way the first time. For this, we had to simply go off the things that we were all collectively doing. and pick from those commonalities. So we needed to pick two of the pre-assigned topics from the topic tab. We allowed just any form of a timer that lets you know where you're at, even just the recording time on whatever you were using to record. 10 minutes to prepare, 3 to 5 minute speeches like the standard of the original study. Speech starts with the recording, round to the nearest 15 seconds. We ended up just using one sheet to keep track of everything, which was our sheet A, and we agreed to do IOA at the end instead of throughout due to time constraints. That leads us into IOA. Now, doing IOA at the end was definitely a limitation to both the validity and the IOA scores, which meant that none of us actually met the 85% IOA. And since we did it at the end, there was no more time for retraining. We completely left out that possibility. So this is likely where the issue of fidelity bled into our IOA as well, since we were working with slightly different beliefs of what we were supposed to be doing. It was also hard to keep our definitions consistent, which we'll see in these upcoming parts. It was a bit of a mess, but also a real learning experience for us. We'll look at my IOA first. As you can see, all of the numbers here are rather low, so missing just a few in that frequency could be a real issue, which also means that we probably should have kept that frequency within interval so that we could say or find where those errors were when trying to cancel our IOA scores. If there was an issue and we could retrain, we could say, oh, you missed this one here, or I found one in interval 15 and you didn't. It would be very easy to go in and retrain there. But that wouldn't have mattered because we didn't do it until the end anyway. Cody's had the same issue, if not even greater, because his IOAs were all so close to each other. Session 1 didn't meet the standard despite only being zero point 0.6 off, and that's even more magnified in session 10 and session 15. So it really just goes to show when you're working with frequency and small numbers, it is very easy to fail that IOA, and you're likely going to need retraining and second looks. Kim's was actually for a bit of a different issue once we looked back over these. We found out that it was due to a definition misunderstanding having to do with tongue clicks, which meant that when recording a lot of Kim's speeches and when Kim would look back over them, she would miss out on some of the tongue clicks, which were about 2 tongue clicks per minute, which you can see that number also reflected in 3 out of her 4 scores being about off by 2 habits per minute, which absolutely tanked the score. So we'll go a bit more into those issues. It was very finicky. It was caused by a low occurrence of the target behavior, especially after intervention, where being off by less than a quarter of a habit per minute could fail us. We also had issues with the definition of filled pauses, which I blame slightly on the initial study, which left it open-ended, meaning that anything could be a filled pause, which made it very difficult to score your own and somebody else's. And tongue clicks in particular were difficult because it could be a natural tongue click from opening your mouth, one that denotes some form of emotion into your sentence. It could be a habit not based on the principles of making you more comfortable in speech. So it led to some subjectivity, which is not what you want in research. We all also took the exit survey that everybody did to talk about how comfortable you were with the procedures, if you liked it and found it effective. We all found that we liked the procedures. I think the part we liked least was running it. We also found them fairly acceptable. They all made sense. The only part we that Kim let us know that she didn't find completely acceptable was raising one hand when you expected an error to take place because it was a bit confusing. I think we all struggled with that portion at least a little bit. But we all found the treatment very effective. We all saw near instant reduction in our habits per minute. And that is the end of the survey. Over to Kim for the limitations.
We found a pretty good amount of limitations throughout. For our individual data collection and IOA data, the pauses were sometimes hard to detect, leading to inconsistent data and IOA. The duration of the study was short, so it is difficult to tell if data would have changed more over time. There were uncontrolled variables that may have influenced the usage of filled pauses. Some of these variables include stress, anxiety, and distractions. We had a small sample size of 3, and this may not have affected the external validity and generalization of the study. Some more limitations include most of awareness training is completed automatically by reading and understanding the study. The rest of the awareness training was essentially completed by scoring the baseline data. Being the researcher and a participant was likely a source of bias. The researchers were not credentialed, and it was their first study. At times, the filled pauses could not be accurately identified as filled pauses. For instance, the tongue clicking was a little bit of an issue. For example, other words such as like or but could have been used in contexts that could be considered as a filled pause, but it was difficult to determine this. We initially planned to assess fidelity using 15-second intervals, but this method proved to be impractical across all videos. As a result, we revised the procedure to a more feasible format, which may have reduced the precision of fidelity measurement. Some more limitations include time constraints due to all of us being full-time college students, full-time employees, and 2 of us being full-time parents. My house especially kept flooding. We were having septic issues and clogging. My dog decided to eat a snake mid-meeting, and that was a bit of an issue. She threw it up and was foaming at the mouth. It was a whole thing. Communication errors led to the accidental omission of some key study features. Having children was an issue with interruptions and other things involved with having children. Doing these at home made it difficult to avoid interruptions, and Zoom errors occurred in our first recording and saving of this presentation, so this is our second run. The original study versus our replication. As much as possible was left the same between studies, but there were a few key differences. Some of these differences include topics were chosen at will and didn't have to be about ABA. IOA data was taken weeks after the sessions. Frequency within interval was replaced with simple frequency per minute. The researchers were also the participants. Treatment fidelity protocol was not detailed in the original study, and we had a smaller sample size. These are some additional research studies that we looked into, and we will talk about those on further slides. Further research into this topic. So source 2 was titled Awareness Training Reduces College Students' Speech Disfluencies in Public Speaking. The goal of this study was to replicate and extend the work of Mancuso and Miltenberger, the source of our original replication project, by evaluating the efficacy of awareness training as a sole intervention. Also, during this study, they tracked rate of speech and additional speech disfluencies that did not undergo treatment to assess potential covariation of these variables. They used frequency within 15-second interval recording system, a non-concurrent multi-baseline design across participants, basically identical to our original Mancuso and Miltenberger design. One difference in the study from original was they reduced preparation time to 5 minutes to prepare when our original was 10 to reduce their time commitment, but they continued with 2 general topic options and a 5-minute speech. Results found awareness training was effective as a sole intervention in all participants, and competing response training was not required. The next source was titled Using Brief Habit Reversal and an Interdependent Group Contingency to Reduce Public Speaking Speech Disfluencies. The goal of this study was twofold: to evaluate the effectiveness of brief habit reversal, BHR, with an interdependent group contingency, and to evaluate the efficacy of competing response using a multiple baseline design. Target behavior was collected using frequency within 15-second interval recording system of 3 speech disfluencies similar to our study in the original Mancuso and Miltenberger study. Interdependent group contingency required all the participants to work for a larger reinforcer instead of a smaller one. Then they needed to remain engaged for the entire interval to earn the larger reinforcer during response identification during BHR. If any participant opted out for the smaller reinforcer, then the entire group would end early and earn the smaller reinforcer. Results for this contingency showed the groups increased their choice for the delayed reinforcer and ended their work duration by 7 times the baseline duration due to 2 of the 6 participants needing to improve their self-control in order to earn the higher reinforcer for the entire group. Results for speech disfluency showed a decrease by about 80% across all participants and remained low to stable in follow-up probes. The next source, titled Reducing Nervous Habits in Public Speaking, an analytical study of awareness training components. The goal of this study was to replicate and extend earlier research by Mancuso and Miltenberger study that was published in 2016. The same study we replicated for our project. The authors wanted to assess the independent effects of response description prior to introducing response detection procedures to determine if response description could be an effective standalone intervention. They wanted to determine if both components of awareness training are needed to obtain reductions in speech disfluencies. Basically, they wanted to identify the active ingredients in the treatment package to improve social validity of intervention and remove unnecessary components. Participants attended 1 to 3 sessions a week. Sessions lasted no longer than 1 hour, and topics were like those of our study and previous Mancuso and Miltenberger study. They used a non-concurrent multi-baseline design across participants. Results show 8 of the 9 participants met a 75% reduction following exposure to 1 or more of the awareness training components. Only 1 participant needed the competing response training. 4 participants met reduction criterion following response description. The remaining 5 were exposed to response detection. Of the 5 who were exposed to response detection, only 1 needed competing response instruction to meet criterion levels. They did, however, recognize a possible covert self-monitoring behavior without direct training occurred due to self-monitoring producing reactivity. Some participants engaged in facial grimaces and vocal statements like oops, oh no, or I said it before being exposed to awareness training. Some of our final thoughts. Did the intervention seem effective? The intervention seemed to be effective across the board, although this is likely due to competing response training and not the awareness training. Would you apply this to real-world settings? Yes, in fact, we would. This presentation is an application of the intervention in the real world. We picked this study due to its practicality. What would you change if doing it again? Use and maintain frequency within interval in order to fix any IOA issues with a second look at the video. Fix the definition to only include specific filled pauses to leave it less vague. Take more time on creating a fidelity checklist as a group. To sum up this project, research is hard. We spent a majority of the project being incredibly confident with our work. All of our members did their share and communicated promptly. We even became friends along the way. We never expected the low fidelity and IOA, but this project has made its mark on us as a great learning experience. Throughout the project, we learned a level of teamwork that we have not seen in prior group work. The biggest takeaway is a sense of humility and an increased knowledge of our strengths and weaknesses in working as a group. Whether or not we continue doing research, I believe we've gained experience that will be vital in any team we are part of in the future. Thank you for being understanding with our errors and have a great rest of the year.
This page right here is just a brief look at our role and contributions regarding this presentation in particular. I will also be submitting this as a Word document as requested. Here are all of the sources we've used, and that is all. Good job, everyone. Let's hope it records this time.